Hello, Dr. Wirt. So, just so you know, this is my second attempt because I thought 2 to 3 minutes I was going to have to include a lot of information, and it turns out I looked at my timer on my first video and I was in 9 minutes and wasn't even close to being done. So, I obviously am including way too much information on the introduction of my pieces. So, we'll try again here and keep it short and sweet. I'm doing two pieces so that the time limit works out closer to what the assignment says. We're doing Do You Hear What I Hear and Christmas of the Toreador. Now, Do You Hear What I Hear? Nice contemporary piece. Found out a little background information written during the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And believe it or not, the composers were not Christians. Noel Rainey was a Catholic when he was born, but he left the church and never went back. He had a lot of life experience with World War II and the Nazis, so you can imagine he had some issues he was working through, and his wife was Jewish. So, all of the iconic things, the star, the lamb, that was all symbolizing things that they wanted to have happen for peace in the world rather than Christian Christmas type thing, even though they wrote it for Christmas time, but still kind of strange how it worked out that it got to be that popular when the writers were not necessarily Christian themselves. Thing that I gathered from this is it's got a lot of nice legato and staccato within the same little phrases, so that the kids are learning techniques and I'm learning techniques on how to conduct those effectively, so I get those articulations to come out. The dynamics and the harmonies are contemporary, but nothing too far out. There's not a lot of high number chords. It's major, minor, few suspensions for interest, and I like to try to play out those suspensions. But problem is the voices that hold the suspensions is my single trombone player that I have trouble getting to play loud. So they get lost in translation a little bit from time to time. The underlying harmonies that are going along, like I said, major, minor, whatever, but we have some writing that reminds me a little bit of like video game scoring or movie scoring, in the climax of each verse, like a star, that portion. Underneath that, we have the saxophones and the French horns, and later on the clarinets going da 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 da. So it gives this intensity and this sense of motion to that portion of the song that adds to its impact. The second piece that I'm going to do is Christmas of the Toreador, obviously written by George Bizet for Carmen. This is as close of a direct quote as you can get from the original, with little snippets of Jingle Bells and God Rest You Merry Gentlemen thrown in. My serious students really enjoy this song because it is so close to the original. It sounds so authentic, so real. Now, I don't know if it's in the same key, and it's not important to me right now. I'm dealing with high school band. Don't care what the original key was. The point is, I need to get this music conveyed to the audience through them and have it sound as close to the original because it's written that way. And dynamics, it's written later in the original was written later in the Romantic era. So we have the propensity to be a little bit extreme in volume, in whatever. And this song doesn't go to huge extremes, but it's strange how it asks certain voices to be, for instance, my woodwinds, they get the loudest part of the song, the climactic part of the march. Another part that I thought was interesting after I got into it was seeing the similarity between this Grand Toreador march and Sousa's march, is where it actually includes a trio section. So, we start off with a ba-ba-da-da-da-da-dum, that's kind of the introduction or the exposition. And a little bit later, the clarinets and oboe, which is my violin player, comes in with a nice soft trio type section where the brass is just adding kind of an ostinato bass, and then we go back into full-blown march land, but it's the saxophones that are leading the way. It's kind of interesting to hear how they decided to arrange that. I would have guessed trumpets would have done it, but anyways, it's I think effective in conveying both classical and contemporary things on the same song, and it's fun to do. So I hope you enjoy both these. So, what was my takeaway from this class? What are the things that I developed? Before I start, I think it's important that I convey how I developed an attitude for graduate level courses in general that covered things I did as an undergraduate, because it seemed like they have a tendency to go so far above and beyond what's practically useful for for everyday, music teachers, working musicians, praise team leaders, whatever, that it almost makes you hate the subject afterwards. I'm thinking case in point, graduate level theory. Yeah, nobody needs that much theory. But I was really pleased at how this course could have gone that way, but it didn't. It stayed well within the area of practical, but took the practical to the next level to where it's really practical and really useful. So again, thank you for I guess a syllabus that allowed me to learn a lot of nice techniques. Now, for my personal growth, I guess the biggest area of personal growth would have to be in learning from Jordan about affirmation of each of the members of my groups. That has made a huge difference in the way I talk to them, just being conscious of that, the way I relate to them, because I'm affirming them as a person and an important part of the group. Now, they might be messing up 7 ways to Sunday, but I treat them differently than I used to. I used to be a little bit condescending in some cases, hopefully not as much as I could be. Point is, by keeping the affirmation side of it going, I'm really a lot better teacher, because everybody that I have in class knows that I appreciate them being there. I recognize them as being there. They know I hear them. And it's even resulted in where in the hallways, the kids will just decide to visit for a minute, or the shyest ones will at least acknowledge and say good morning after I say good morning to them. So there's been a better relationship all the way around. So the affirmation in personal growth, I think, is the biggest takeaway I've taken there. Sorry, I've got to read my notes or I'm going to forget. And the other aspect of personal growth is the responsibility that I'm putting back on the students that I don't have to control. Okay, I am in charge of the total sound, but I can't play their horns for each one of them, so I have had to figure out ways to get them to see what their job is and hopefully be able to fulfill their role, and as a result, the whole group gets better. So it's helpful that they are taking that role on now because they know they're important and they know they have a job to do, and it's just made a big difference in my band especially. So the techniques, I think the biggest thing that I got was, because of this class, I got a baton back out. I had taught for 11 years back in the late 90s, early 2000s, then had been away from teaching for over 17 years. So when I came back, I didn't even own a baton, and now because of this class, I'm using a baton with band, and just by putting that thing in my hand, my attitude changes. It's almost kind of like, if you're familiar with horse training, if you have a horse who's wearing a halter, nothing's going on, but you put that specific bit in his mouth and he knows, hey, it's time to go do whatever work that we're going to do at that point. They just know. And by picking up the baton, it's like my mindset gets centered on how can I be a good conductor and convey specific ideas with just the tip of that stick. So that's been a technique thing, which, so I'm holding the baton, and other techniques is expression and good beat patterns and articulation. All these things are happening because I'm holding a baton in my hand and it's keeping me in the moment. And I am getting more expressive because of presentations by Dr. Suttles about the Laban method, and just all the nice little tips and tricks that are provided through the text and through the presentations have helped me grow, and I can see a difference in my groups because they're responding, because it's a proven technique and it works. Another thing that I've taken is I'm making better eye contact with my group. I'm more prepared, which I used to just grab the score, let's go to it. But now I'm studying the scores, and so that's helped a lot. Now, as far as my listening, wow. And again, we'll go back to Dr. Jordan's book, where he talks about how everybody has has their idea of a perfect sound. Well, by trying to get in touch with that, now I'm listening to my group a better way, and I'm hearing things almost with a laser focus. Kind of in the same analogy would be, if you remember, if you watched the movie Patriot, there was a line in there when the dad was getting ready to attack the British, and he told his young son, remember what I taught you, aim small, miss small. And it's basically an analogy, is if you aim for the tiniest center of something, even if you miss the tiniest center, you're going to hit the bigger picture. Well, with my listening, I'm listening for the smallest thing. And, I'm still probably missing a few things, but I'm so much more in tune to things that I had just been glossing over before. It's helped a lot. So my listening has gone up quite a ways. And then finally, the leadership aspect of it goes back to that affirmation that we talked about earlier. My students know that my passion for music drives almost everything I do. So when I'm grumpy because things aren't working quite right, they know that I'm not upset with them, and I've explained it to them. I don't think that they are less of a person. I think the music is suffering, and it's driving me crazy. We have to get that music figured out. Well, now that they realize that I'm passionate about the music, they can get behind that. They see my excitement, they see my drive, they know that I want it to be as close to perfect as we can get it. Of course, obviously perfect never happens, but you try, okay? It was interesting that Dr. Sharp's last presentation talked about the passion, the confidence, and then the knowledge. And the kids always knew that I knew what I was doing with music, but as a result of this course, they're starting to see more. I'm letting them see more of the passion, so that, and then of course my confidence, if something's not going right, I just right then demonstrate it, and I'm not embarrassed at all or whatever, and they're starting to see it's like, oh, well, he knows what he's doing, so let's listen to him. So again, this portion of the video has getting maybe a tick long. I do appreciate the class. I did enjoy the things we had to learn. I was worried there for a moment it was going to go way out into the zen of conducting, and yeah, I got no time for that. I'm more into mechanics, nuts and bolts, and there was plenty of that, so I appreciate the way this class was put together. And I guess I'll just offer you blessings for the future, and maybe we'll cross paths. Bye-bye.